Disney just doesn't get it and doesn't seem to learn from their mistakes. I mean, if we look back at 2023, it was obviously the worst year for the Walt Disney Company for two reasons. It was the box office flop trend of 2023, and it so happened to land on their 100th anniversary, alright? And number two, they were getting mocked left and right by major organizations and people that were high status, like Elon Musk, for example, really just calling out Disney left and right. You had the Daily Wire, you had South Park Studios calling them out and making a parody of them. I mean, it was not a good Q4 of 2023 for Disney and Bob Iger. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So we already know that Bob Iger, as many like to call him Bob Liger, this man will say whatever he has to say to string along the shareholders and customers into the following year, whatever it takes until 2026 when he plans to step down as CEO. By the way, the board, they already have a good idea of who's going to take his place. They have a roster of CEOs that will eventually take over Bob Iger. I've been saying this from day one of course, the overall picking phase, if you will, that they are trying to figure out who's going to take his place. I think it's going to be somebody worse. I don't think it's going to be somebody better. In fact, I think it will be somebody that is more extreme with the overall quote-unquote DEI agenda. Now, that brings us to Snow White 2025 and the financial disaster and collapse that surrounds this project. Let's get into this, shall we? Now, specifically, of course, we already know that Bob Iger is in a phase of panic mode right now for obvious reasons, with all divisions at the Walt Disney Company beginning to head into damage control and panic mode after multiple emergency meetings. One major development now has much to do with Disney CEO Bob Iger and the current financial situation with Snow White 2025. Now, one serious update to this scenario happening right now behind the scenes at the Walt Disney Company is that a recent emergency meeting that was held rapidly addressed the ongoing backlash, of course connected to all things Marvel, Star Wars, and the Disney live-action remakes, and how the Disney heads are also in serious panic mode now after they recently got exposed with their DEI agenda. Now, the budget for Snow White 2025 reportedly falls in line with a $280 million margin, which reportedly doesn't involve marketing costs. The marketing costs are reportedly bumping the budget up to $350 million, along with tens of millions of dollars in reshoots, nearing a total of $400 million for Snow White. Already, Disney analysts that were involved in the recent emergency meeting warned those like Bob Iger and the board that they project the film is going to fail on a massive scale due to a 5 failed test screening phase already, especially the most recent one, which scared Disney executives after Rachel Zegler's acting capability was blasted and the ending was described as a deal breaker for the film that would cause massive walkouts in theaters. In addition to this, however, Disney is also hiring more animators to fix some aspects of the Seven Dwarfs, which by the way are done in CGI, which is reportedly going to cost them an extra $10 million across the board to reshoot all of those segments and scenes. Bob Iger and the Disney heads, of course, have also engaged in conversations of potentially canceling this film from arriving in theaters if the challenges and setbacks do not ease, and to only release it on Disney Plus in hopes of all their subscribers tuning into this film. This is said to be Disney's last resort, however, after the chance of delaying the film from March of 2025 until summer. The entire Snow White creative team and of course, those that are behind that, those like writer Greta Gerwig, who, by the way, created the Barbie movie, by the way, who specifically wrote the film to mock the patriarchy, led to a series of failed test screenings. Big shocker there, right? Disney is still reportedly keeping at it with their agenda as instructed by Greta Gerwig. However, the reshoots are said to be costing Disney $30 to $35 million, which is already creating a serious divide and a chain of arguments from Disney executives about the likely failure this is going to become. Now guys, before I move on about this, alright, let me just say one thing here about Snow White 2025. Now, We all know that this movie is going to be a disaster based on the terrible PR by Rachel Zegler and based on what Greta Gerwig said about this movie, as well as Mark Webb, the director of this movie, who, by the way, I think is just not fit for this role. But what's interesting about this is the fact of how much money they are pouring into Snow White. The fact that they're pouring tens of millions of dollars more into the reshoots is extremely revealing and very much alarming for their sake. Now, we know that the marketing expenses, of course, for this thing is going to be at a new level of something that we have never seen before. Something that you have never seen before with The Little Mermaid, for example. It is going to outperform that, and it's going to dethrone that status. Now, look, we all know that Bob Iger has no idea what he's doing. Sure, Inside Out 2 was a success for them, and I don't think at the same exact time it's going to necessarily save Disney, but it may very well keep things afloat for Pixar. Now, there's a lot of things also going on over at Pixar that's going to further their DEI agenda in the long run. I think that everything's just going to eventually crumble and collapse for Pixar, because regardless, they are still going through with firing hundreds of employees. That's not stopping. Alright, regardless of the success of Inside Out 2, they are still firing hundreds of employees across the board. So that's also another revealing factor. Now, on top of everything here, massive amounts of Snow White 2025 merchandise that was prematurely created when they assumed this movie would be releasing in 2024 was also cancelled and are being redone to be in a cheaper margin for Disney fans, not just for theme parks but also for retail stores. That alone resulted in a loss of millions of dollars for the Walt Disney Company, not to mention that actress Rachel Zegler is also reportedly furious after she was booted and fired from appearing in 2 Snow White live-action sequels that were supposed to turn this whole thing into a full-fledged trilogy of films. So I talked about this earlier, a couple months ago. They wanted to turn this whole thing into a ridiculous trilogy. Like they're trying to act like it's Star Wars or something. Now look, we know that The Lion King, they're trying to do something kind of similar. They want to make 3 movies catered to that overall brand. You got The Lion King 2019, now they're making the prequel, Mufasa, and they eventually want to make a Lion King 2 by 2027. We'll talk more about that down the road. I think that's also going to fail, by the way. Nobody's asking for these projects, nobody's asking for what Disney is chasing, and they don't seem to learn, right? We know that 2025 is going to be a chain of disasters when it comes to Marvel, based on all the drama that's surrounding Blade 2025 right now, and let's not forget everything else coming along with Star Wars for 2026. I mean, that's also not going to be good for them in the long run. So overall, I think that Snow White 2025 is most certainly going to get delayed. I'm not quite sure if they're going to end up canceling this thing, but there have been rumblings about, those conversations happening and how they do want to actually put that as a possibility. But right now, delaying the movie is 100% something that could very well happen next year. It's something that Bob Iger and the Disney heads have been talking about, delaying it by a couple of months more until the summer of next year instead of March. By the way, I think a lot of that might have to do with Captain America 4, but moving on, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.